Hi, welcome to Soapbox Speakers, also known as Guess Whose Birthday It Is!
Oh, you son of a bitch. Yep, it's my birthday. Whoop whoop.
And we're going to podcast if he wants to.
You're shardy. It's your birthday. We're going to make a podcast because it's your birthday. And we're drinking beer because it's your birthday. And we don't even give a fuck, but it's my birthday. So.
It is your birthday. I can't beatbox. Sorry, I had nothing to do there. But I would like to talk today about how it would seem the right-wing newspapers seem to lose their shit whenever pensioners get arrested for killing a man.
Oh, right, yeah.
In his house, defending his house.
Yeah, no, it's
Richard Osborne Brooks
weird.
was a pensioner arrested for for defending his property while two burglars broke in. One of those burglars, they both left, and one of those burglars later died because of the injuries he'd incurred.
Because he got shanked.
So, yeah, because he got stabbed. And got
in the chest.
Oddly enough, in the UK, if you have a fight with someone, or a struggle, and they die, you get arrested because we have this thing called due process. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but that's kind of a thing that we have.
What I've noticed most about this is the fact that there's just been a large amount of Americans that have gone, this is why we shouldn't let them take our guns. Look what they do in Europe. They arrest people for defending themselves in their home and they don't even have guns. I'd like to point out, by the way, that in a gunless society, a 78-year-old man managed to defend his own home using nothing but what was in his kitchen. Yeah. So I feel like, if anything, that's an argument for gun control rather than against it.
And it's not even like he had time to prepare. He was up against two who were like, we're going to rob this guy. They had time to plan.
Two 40-year-old men, and he was asleep upstairs with his disabled wife, and then came down to discover himself being robbed and fought them off.
I think the only thing we can conclude from this
man is a hero.
Is that first of all, that this man is a hero, but also potentially that Americans are just pussies.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
They only feel badass if they've got a gun. Nothing worse than the pussy with a gun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Guns take all the sport out of it, really.
Yeah.
And that's what the English understood from an early point.
Yeah. For a long time.
Which is why we probably lost the Civil War, but still.
We've been fighting off Vikings for a long time.
Did we use guns then? I don't know if we used. Did we need guns? I thought we were like, fuck the Americans.
They were like muskets, weren't they? Like first age. You would know this, surely.
In the Civil War, they were definitely muskets. Right. Like they were also bringing in revolvers at that point. Like it was it was like 1860s, 70s. No, I can't say that now. I've got to look it up because it's going to be wrong.
I'm going to level with you. My knowledge of military history and general history and history in general is pretty sparse.
Really?
It's one of my great weaknesses. Yeah.
I was going to say, because when you were like, well, they had muskets then, right? I was like, are you making jokes? No, my God, you're being serious.
Literally what I was imagining was reenactors and things I'd seen at reenactments.
You know what? I said 1860s, right?
Was it
1860s? 1861 to 1865.
Fucking boom. What's the lesson here? What's the lesson here? Never doubt yourself.
Always doubt myself. But, yes. No, so the Civil War was pretty brutal, to be fair. Like, it was muskets, for the most part. But I think...
And who won? No, I'm joking.
The French.
Society's what won.
You know who didn't win? The slaves.
Oh.
They thought they did, but... took a long while. Still going.
Oh, God.
Found different ways of enslaving them, you know.
Yeah,
Harking back to the... Anyway, that was a massive tangent.
So, speaking of pensioners... so, he was arrested. He was questioned.
And they don't think they're going to prosecute.
And then he was posted on bail. Because the judge decided, you know what, I don't think this pensioner is potentially a risk that we need to keep locked up. He's not a threat to society.
I wonder how much the bail was.
Given the context of it, that's a good question. Given the context of everything that happened, he can go on bail, he's not a flight risk.
Just as a question, with bail, if you are proven innocent, do you then get your bail money back?
I've often wondered this, and I don't know.
Because you kind of feel like you should do it.
A part of me kind of feels like it's the price you pay for due process. If you know what I mean. But then equally, he's been forced into that position because of two criminals deciding to do that.
Yeah.
Like,
and also, if he's not a threat to society, why does he need to pay money to go back into it?
the other thing is, the expression made bail may just mean like, yeah, you can go.
Right, yeah.
I don't think it necessarily means you have to pay bail. I don't know if there's necessarily a figure. That may just be an American
They
thing.
might just grant you bail.
Yeah, it may well just be an American thing now that I think about it.
Do you know what? Time to go to Google.
You go to Google. Yeah, so he was released on bail, and then he was later found completely innocent of all culpability, not even guilty of manslaughter. The defence was justifiable. So, yeah, Americans, if you're listening, here's some advice. If someone breaks into your home, don't just shoot. Tell them to leave. And if they refuse and then they come attacking you, then you can put two in the chest.
I don't feel like we're justified in giving people home defence advice because I don't want to get anyone killed. So I'm just going to be like, why don't you take some lessons from, like, I don't know, a cop or, I don't know, an ex-army person about...
But if it's a cop, isn't it just going to be like, if like they're dark-skinned or brown, shoot them?
Oh, are we going there?
Well...
Like... Damn, I mean, like...
It's been a long time coming.
True enough.
It's been a long time coming.
So, let's talk about how American cops shoot black people. Let's also talk about how UK cops shoot black people.
Yeah, why not? Like, in the UK, we have this thing of where no one in our armed response is armed with fully automatic weapons. Not even like the equivalent of SWAT. I mean, we don't really have SWAT. We have armed response. That's our SWAT, right? And literally, they have to file a report for every bullet that they shoot and where, like, they were aiming when they shot it and where it ended up. Which is one of the reasons they're not given fully automatic weapons, because it's really difficult to keep track of the bullets, and they have a habit of going into people that you don't necessarily want them to go into. And also, because we have such, like, decent gun control, I'm not going to say it's amazing, because we have had the occasional, like, killing spree involving firearms.
There's been a couple of people.
Yeah.
Shot
Let's not
London.
pretend that
like, there are enough guns in London that people get.
Oh
shot
yeah, I mean, those are guns that have been imported illegally. What I'm referring to is, like, you can get a gun in the UK. It's just you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get it.
Well, it depends. Shotguns are fairly easy to get a license for.
Yeah, but you also have to be able to lock them away and secure them, or you have to have them at a club. So, like, the level of access, like the ease of access to a firearm isn't necessarily as good as easy as it is in America.
Unless you make your own.
Well, this is it. Like a lot of the firearms that are used by gangs are like cobbled together by parts that have been smuggled in,
or like replicas that have been drilled,
that
sort of thing,
and had firing pins put back in and shit. Yeah.
But bail in the UK, bail can be granted unconditionally.
Yeah.
But if you are expected to give a sum of money as a guarantee that you won't fuck off, it is a sum of money that is a guarantee that you're basically going, I'm not going to run away. Here's my money.
It's a deposit.
So
it's a deposit for like I'm so honourable.
You only lose the money if you
fuck off.
If you fuck off.
That's awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's the same in America.
That's a good question. I don't know.
So, British cops shooting black folk. Not going to pretend it hasn't happened, because it has. It was one of the triggers for the London riots.
It was. But again, like, thinking about that, like, that wasn't like a clear-cut case of, he's unarmed, shoot him, quick!
Yeah, like, there are vagaries here, and I do understand why people are very distrustful of the police in the UK. We used to have this thing called stop and search, where they did tend to target people of colour, shall we say. So I've realised of saying black folk, and that might be taken the wrong way. I don't mean to be, like, dismissive or insincere.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, because it used to be people of colour, and then they were like, no, call them black, and then they were like, no. So I feel like as long as we're not being racist,
I will put it like
probably
this.
all right.
Any expression I use, I am not trying to offend people. I'm not trying to offend anyone. Okay. It's not done with malice in my heart. I'll put it that way.
I think everybody out there feels much better and safer in the knowledge that you aren't trying to offend them.
Yeah.
At this time.
And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I haven't gone out of my way to offend people. I absolutely have. It's just never to do with the colour of their skin, or their religion, or their faith, or their creed.
Everything to do with the colour of their stupidity.
It's got everything to do with the content of their character.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I've got loads of black friends, because I haven't.
No, neither do I, actually, funnily enough. Which always makes me kind of go, well, shit, man, I should make some black friends. And then I'm like, but I don't want to be that white guy that goes out of their way to make some friends that are black, just so they can have black friends.
Yeah,
like, I just don't meet any, like, on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, does that mean, like...
Like, black people don't LARP.
Yeah.
That's basically
That's not strictly
it.
true. That's not strictly true. Like, I have one friend who is black, and the only reason I know him is because of LARP.
Okay.
So, but I'm not going to...
strictly true.
My point is here, I don't refer to him or think of him as my black friend, right? Because that's not his defining characteristic in my mind.
Yeah.
It's just, now that I think about it, the one friend that I do have, who happens to be black, I only know because of LARP. And your point about LARP, I just thought that was quite funny. It's like, well, I do have one friend who this applies to, and he is LARP.
And he's the only black person that goes to LARP.
Well, it's not true. I mean, I've been to LARPs, and I've said, but like as a general rule, yeah, like it's not really. I don't know. I don't know how heavy geek chic and geek culture is in.
In where?
Like
what?
Like it's a cultural
I don't know,
thing.
You've lost me now.
It's a cultural thing, right?
What is?
Like, so certain things that we do are cultural, not.
Oh,
do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, I see. Like how much. Like,
okay, so
being a geek has to do with your...
Well, I'll put it like this. There's a reason why there are, like ethnic groups that have congregated into communities in London, right? It's because they share, like, a similar culture and, like, identity, and they make that place their own. It's why you have, like, Nottingham Carnival and shit like that, right? So...
But it does slowly disperse.
Yeah, totally. And, like, equally, like, people spread around. But, like, there's a reason why, first of all, there's such a strong ethnic presence in London, because generally when those mass migrations occurred, like I'm thinking, like was it in the 60s or the 50s? There was like a mass migration.
There's been several different.
Yeah, a couple of kinds, and then like it was
time.
Pakistanis at one point, and then like another, and then eventually like the Polish later and stuff like that. But like in those periods of times, because of the airports that you were getting, like I'm not also right thinking there were sections of London really kind of deprived and. Like, not enough people were living there, so that's what was used for social housing to house particularly great. Like, the history I'm a bit hazy on the history of all this, but but my point...
I don't think any part of London is deprived or poor.
My point about
this... Like, not worth a lot.
My point about this is, like, each group has, like, its own culture and identity. Each community has its own culture and identity. So, like, Folkestone has its own kind of culture and identity. Right? Which is different to, say, Hive.
Okay.
Or Dover.
Yeah.
Right?
It's nicer. It's not a shithole like Dover. It's not pretending to be posh like Hive.
Yeah.
Actually, to be fair, it is pretending to be posh. With all of these fucking...
So anyway, like, I did have a point here. What was my point?
Honestly, mate, you lost me about 5 minutes ago, and I'm struggling to figure out where we got to. So, should we go back to cops shooting black people?
We can do, but, like, I just... Like, I guess what I'm kind of getting at is, I just don't think... Well, don't get me wrong, there's a huge stigma to being a LARPer anyway. In a lot of communities.
Oh, I see. Well,
right?
like, I mean...
And then equally, I think this...
I would go as far as to say not as high as the stigma is for being black in a lot of communities.
So. I'm not doing comparative, like, stigmatization.
Oh, okay.
I'm just talking about the fact that there is one. It's not like... I'm not trying to create, like, a scale of it.
Alright, fair enough. I would say there isn't. I just think a lot of people kind of go, you're into some weird shit,
on that
you're
point,
not my kind of
on
people.
that point, I do remember reading a book by, I forget her name, but it was to do with, she was a feminist writer, and basically the whole book was centered around how she felt that one of the most marginalized groups within her community were gay black men. Like, it was incredibly difficult at that point in time to be black and openly gay.
Wow, I mean,
in their community.
Like,
it would be a bit like a Hasidic Jew.
I'm just imagining periods where it was like a black man would come out as gay and white gay men who were still racist. and that would be like, what the fuck? Like, how would you, like,
So my point is, like, you get these, in different communities, you get these different sets of values at different point, like, that have different intensities and different reactions to different situations.
Right.
And I think this is my point. I think geek culture is potentially underrepresented.
I don't think that is the case. I think LARP is underrepresented, but I don't think geek culture is anymore. So, like, I mean, Marvel is now a mainstream.
We're speculating, yeah, we're okay, but, like, how many people of colour watch Marvel? Do you know what I mean? Is it proportional?
I think possibly a lot, considering, Black Panther.
Really?
I mean,
I was thinking about this the other day.
Actually, no.
You know what I realised?
When I looked around in the cinema, I was like, there are so many white people here.
Literally all white people. I don't think. Anyway.
But that might just be where I live.
Yeah. There is that. But what I was thinking about the other day is, like, you know what I've realised is quite possibly the best ever Marvel film that I just feel as if everyone has forgotten and just got so much right. Blade.
Yeah,
like it was the first 18. Like,
well, I mean, some of it wasn't that good.
First R-rated movie,
right?
Had a main protagonist character who was black, but it wasn't their defining characteristic. Had the only thing, had multiple female characters who were important throughout the film, and they talked to each other, and they didn't talk about guys. It passes the Bechdel test. Like, that film got so much right.
Yeah. Also had the cheesy end fight to the 90s dance music.
Fuck yeah!
No.
Fuck yeah!
No, fuck that.
And that iconic scene of, like, the ecstasy tripping ravers in the club, like, having a blood rave.
Well, when the sprinklers turn on, blood. It's just like, where did they get that blood? Is that human blood or is that, like, animal blood? I don't know. How did they keep it fresh?
There is that.
Where did it come from? Are they pumping it from the animals directly into the
wasn't a
sprinkler
butcher's
system?
yacht. It wasn't.
Do you think maybe it's just coloured water for effect? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Why would vampires decide, you know what we're going to do when we're doing our secret rave where all the humans don't know we're vampires? Let's have blood fucking coming out of the sprinklers as a little, like, hey guys, lol, we're vampires.
Are we forgetting, like, the whole, like, beginning of the first act is to do with the fact that Drogo is doing... Is it Drogo?
I don't know.
The
vampire guy.
The heroin fuckboy.
Alright, okay.
Because he looks like a junkie and just looks like he's, seen a few up close. Deacon Frost, that was his name.
Okay. I'm worried we're going a little bit too far into film plots here.
You've got a point.
Which is what we're trying to avoid.
My point here is, like, if you want to choose, like, a great Marvel film to gush over, it's Blade. Like, hands down Blade. There is so much that thing gets right.
Yeah.
Like the story's good. The story is strong.
But it does kind of prove that geek culture is a bit more mainstream now and a bit more represented. And I think LARP is, because LARP's a bit more out there.
No, yeah.
So like Marvel and DC is the equivalent of being gay, but LARP is the equivalent of being trans.
You may have a point. Although I don't like this scale of, like,
No. I'm not saying that they are equivalent in any way. I'm just saying that the difference is appreciable.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm not saying being a LARPer is as rending as being trans.
No, I know you're not. But
my
my point is, like, you're implying that, like, people who are trans, therefore, like, experience more oppression than gay people. Although, actually, what you could just say is that they're less represented.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Like, as in, I don't know what the statistics are, actually.
Actually, no. Do you know what? Because trans people are fairly well known now. I mean, they're not respected, but they are well represented. So,
okay.
maybe my analogy is off, but who cares? I'm not here to
This was like, of all the discussions we've had, this is probably the discussion that's made me the most uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it's the beer. Like,
oh yeah, there's beer. You guys can't see this, but you did.
I did. Okay. I said that at the beginning. I was like, we're drinking beer.
Okay. So policemen shooting
black people. Let's
black
get back
people,
to the more safe and comfort.
Like they did in Blade. See, it's all linked. The opening scene.
Yeah. I don't remember it, but yeah.
Anyway.
No. Next topic. Unless we had more to say.
No, we're not going to talk about American police shooting.
Oh, okay, yeah. American police shoot a lot of black people. It's not cool.
Yeah, and like statistically speaking, they shoot a lot of black people.
Actually, I mean, statistically speaking, you can spin it that they shoot more white people than black people, but I don't think that takes into consideration
per capita of like the ratio.
It just takes into consideration the number of people shot.
Yeah, obviously there are more white people in America.
I know, but like that's quite often the fucking stats that are thrown about immediately. It's like, well, more white people are shot than black people by police.
Well, the other one is like black on black crime and black on white crime. Like those are other statistics that get thrown about. Like you're like as a black man, you're more likely to get killed by another black man than a cop, for example.
Yeah, but that's because you live in.
That's because ghettoization is a thing. Yeah, and also, this is kind of why people make the argument for this thing called white privilege, because you have ghettoization where literally you can only live and exist in that community, which is like, and you are deliberately I say deliberately, it would appear that the odds are very much stacked against you and not in your favour, to use that parlance. If you are black and live in that community, it is very hard to get out of that community and prosper unless you're dribbling a ball or dropping sick beats. So
or selling a lot of.
You're selling a lot of crack or pimping a lot of hoes.
And even then, you don't tend to.
And even then, your lifespan's pretty short. Like, not to generalise that's all that happens, but like.
Yeah. Now talking about uncomfortable conversations. But I can't remember what I was going to say now. Shit. How depressing.
I wonder what the survivability of a white pimp is over a black pimp. No, seriously. Like,
I know you're being serious. I'm just like, how the fuck would we ever get that information?
There must be stats on this.
That being said, there is I've been watching, very briefly, like the first couple of episodes, a documentary on bare knuckle fighting in the UK.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
And I was like, I
haven't watched it.
This is fucking mental. Like, because I was just like, first of all, I thought it was illegal. Apparently, it's not. It's not illegal, and it's not legal. So it's
in one of those grey areas.
Yeah.
I think it's like if you like pay to see it, it then becomes illegal, and like there's all kinds of weird like.
Right. Well, they're paying to see it, so it's probably illegal.
Right,
but anyway, this guy's like putting on shows, and I can't even remember how this ties in now. Oh yeah, white pimps. So like maybe you could get pimps to. Like, if you started a documentary about pimps, like, maybe you could get a load of information about them.
I mean, first of all, I know that there are documentaries about pimps, so I've watched them.
Like, that follow pimps and film them.
Yeah, like, there's, you know in, like, that Dave Chappelle episode where it's, like, the baller, it's those guys dressed as pimps, riffing on each other, right? I can't remember what they skit.
I don't remember that.
Okay, right. That is like a spin-off, like, that's a homage to... There used to be a thing, like, there were, like, pimp awards. Like, pimps, like, like in Harlem and shit. Like, they'd be like, they'd rent out a function room, and all these pimps would turn up with their hoes, and it would be like, who is the most pimp? Like, their pimp names, I'm not making this up, I'm serious, man, this exists. Like, this was like Channel 4 really late at night, early reality TV, from America that like they were showing on channel. I remember watching it.
Oh
like,
man, it's got to be fake.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously the pimp game's pretty fake. You've got to talk a big game, but in reality, you could be shitting it, but you got to keep cool. You got to be ice.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So,
but anyway, like, it was
the other thing I would say is our policemen are far less likely to actually shoot someone.
Purely because they don't have guns.
Well, no. Like, even if armed response is called, generally they de-escalate the situation to the point where they don't actually need to shoot the person.
That's because our cops are trained to deal with things non-lethally.
Yeah, and like they have a myriad of shit to deal with it. I mean, there's some great.
And I hate to say it, our cops are more highly trained than US cops are.
Yeah.
So
like the bar of entry to become a cop in the UK is pretty fucking high, and the bar of entry for you to get a gun as a policeman is even fucking higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the fitness requirements aren't quite as high as army, but they're close. And it's just anyway, and if you're going to fire a gun in the police force, I think in fact the requirements at that point would then be higher than they are in the army.
Yeah. Oh no, totally. They absolutely are. Yeah.
Because you've got to be like sound of mind, sound of body.
You've literally got to
be a fucking marksman.
You've got to be able to justify every bullet that you fire.
Yeah, you've got to be able to hit your target with every bullet that you fire.
And you've got to explain. And if you missed, you've got to explain why. Like, there's a whole myriad of shit that they have to do. Yeah. And also, as a side note, if they shoot someone, they immediately get put on. I forget what it's called, but basically they can't be a beat cop. They can't. It's not like a disciplinary or something. They still get paid. It's just they can no longer function as armed response until like a full investigation has been done.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen in America.
Nope. There was actually when I was in Bristol a couple of months ago, there was a guy who got in his car with a 9mm Glock and drove down the motorway. I can't remember what he was going to do. I don't think they ever found out. But essentially, the motorway that he was driving down, somebody saw him and phoned the police. And the motorway, and further down the motorway was the turn off to the main area, the main base for armed response police in the UK. So this guy was driving down this motorway with a Glock, got clocked. Armed response come out immediately, literally just driving next to him, stopped the car and fucking murdered him.
Murdered him.
Yep.
Poor choice of words, but okay.
They shot him quite a few times.
Oh, okay.
Like there was no.
This is a depressing story that I feel undermines our point about British police.
No. I mean, like I was just saying, like how stupid have you got to be to drive down towards?
Well, okay, you say that. We're going to do a little share time of armed response stories that we know.
Oh, God.
And I know this one because it was the whole thing was captured on video. Because basically, a guy had I think it was an improvised revolver or like an old service revolver that had been reconditioned to fire. They were treating it as if it was a live firearm, and I think on investigation it was a potential live firearm, functioning firearm. And he held up a bus. And he told the driver of the bus to drive to a particular town. What was funny about that is the bus was going to that town anyway. Like, he literally did not need to hold up the bus. He could have got his ticket and got. In actual fact, I think he did buy a ticket. Just didn't twig that the bus was going to where he wanted to go, and then evacuate. Like, everyone else gets off the bus. Like, because I think the bus driver's just like, can I get everyone else off the bus? Like, I'll take you there. Just can I get everyone else off the bus? To which he was like, yeah, okay. So it's just like our buses have loads of cameras. So like there's loads of footage of this from multiple angles. So he sat in the back of the bus with this revolver, and the bus driver's driving along. But he's got a radio. Guy doesn't know that this guy's got a radio. So he like radios in, and it's just like, yeah, I'm being held at gunpoint. And like, the network that runs the bus service like immediately contact the police. And the police then, the police then speak to him through his radio and are just like, okay, you're going to go into the town, you're going to go here, you're going to pull up outside the police station. Outside the police station, they had 3 armed response guys, like with full rifle kind of deal. As soon as he pulls up, doors swing open, and one of the first policeman just fucking barrels in. Gun just trained on this guy straight away, and just immediately and just starts shouting at him, drop the gun now, drop the gun. He drops the gun and they just arrest him. He doesn't go in and just fucking guns blazing, just bounds on. It's just like, you're gonna drop that gun now.
Yeah.
So how stupid have you got to be? It's pretty fucking common.
Stupidity, sadly, is quite common.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered that subject.
In a roundabout
way. Got to plug Blade as
I'm glad that made you happy.
Best ever best ever Marvel film, bar none. Fight me.
I have many times. Headbutted me. It wasn't fun.
Yeah, it was. So, subjects I have.
I totally have subjects.
You've got one?
No.
Oh. Tease. Oh, yes, this was a subject that we talked about the other day. Well, a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
You were talking about this idea
I'm
that...
assuming not on the podcast.
No, but like...
Okay.
Anyway.
I'm just clarifying that for everyone else.
No, yeah, we did talk about
Oh,
it. Again?
Again?
Jesus.
God, jeez. God, jeez, Rick. Don't get distracted. Tell me.
So you were talking about like how much do like the old epic tales encourage people of that time to kind of be heroic and heroes? Like,
yeah.
Does Beowulf?
No. I was talking about how much media impacts the way we behave. So, like the way we treat our friends, the way we approach relationships and have them. Like, how much of that is influenced by what we see as relationships in media, because bar from seeing the relationship that your mother and father have, you don't really get a whole lot of insight into any other relationships other than through what you see on TV or in the cinema, and how much of that has an impact on like the way relationships develop for I'd say like young teenagers to young adults.
Yeah. And
how maybe that's like fucking us over a little bit, because we're approaching things in a totally unrealistic way because of the way that because media relationships are very unrealistic.
Because Disney gave us unrealistic expectations about love.
Well, like the amount of people that are like, I want to find the Harley to my, I want to find the Joker to my Harley.
Oh yeah,
sort of
yeah.
shit. And Harlequin and Joker is an inherently abusive and very, very damaging relationship, and a lot of people idolise it. I mean, I don't know if that's because they don't know what it is, but I mean, some people must read the comic and go, yeah, that's what I want.
Well, I mean, I would argue there's a difference between liking a character and what you like about that character, and then actually understanding what that character represents and is.
Yeah, true.
Which is a constant like process. I mean, I'm just thinking in life in general. So like, there are things like that I would never have understood as a teenager that I now understand better as an adult. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think like. When it comes to things like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not disputing the idea that, well, actually, the better example would be like a more like catch-all example would be 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, you've got a good point there.
Which like
50 Shades of Abuse.
Yeah, pretty much, but it's painted as this kind of like, oh, it's so kind of naughty and romantic.
Okay, so like, I'm going to briefly touch on a subject that we were going to save for a specific podcast. But, dating apps. A lot of the profiles that I've seen on dating apps have been, I am looking for my, whatever the guy's name is, like, can't remember his fucking name now. Like
Ryan Gosling?
Well, no, but
because who doesn't want Ryan Gosling?
Like whatever the guy in 50 Shades of Grey is called, they're like, I'm looking for my Mr. Grey. Or whatever it is, or it's just like, I'm just like, I've read 50 Shades of Grey and that's what I'm looking for, and it's just like, did you read it though? Like, did you really?
Well, this is my point. There's a difference between like reading it and liking it, and then understanding it.
Yeah. So
like people treat these like exchanges as if, oh, that's normal because I've read it. But then like there's an extra layer to it that people don't necessarily immediately spot, which is that actually no, this is kind of emotionally manipulative and kind of abusive and maybe not that healthy, pretty controlling, pretty unhealthy, really.
Anyway,
but the thing is, we're not taught this. You don't get taught this in sex ed or anything like that. You're not taught like this is what a healthy relationship looks like. This is what like supporting one another emotionally and as well as physically looks like.
Yeah.
Because we're more concerned about STDs. When in reality, I think probably more people suffer from unhealthy relationships and like the psychological burden that can entail than potentially they suffer from STDs, and that emotional damage potentially is far more damaging than any physical damage that the STD could cause.
Yeah, you've got a point.
So it's just one of those interesting things, but which I like you mentioned earlier, you're expected to kind of be shown by your parents or parental figures at any rate.
Yeah.
Um,
But what if your
You don't-
parental figures aren't a healthy relationship? Then you've really got nothing to rely on. Anyway, sorry, backtracking a little bit. So like, however, it does branch into a more like wide scope in the, you know, how does media affect the way we behave in everything, not just relationships, to be clarified, because like I'm wondering, because the, you know, the whole idea of a hero, like the bank's getting robbed, but then the security guard tackles the guy and saves the day, or Joe Bob comes out of nowhere and saves everything. How much does that influence the way people then act in those situations and potentially get themselves killed?
or case in point, how much does a video of someone eating a Tide Pod influence everyone else eating a Tide Pod, or snorting a condom?
Yeah.
Does that make everyone else snort a condom?
Or the ice bucket challenge.
Yeah. I mean, the ice bucket challenge kind of had a point.
Yeah, but
although
like,
I think that point was potentially lost.
somewhat. like give to charity, ice. Like,
Yeah, ice,
No,
but
I'm not giving to charity.
Ice bucket, but did not give to charity.
Yeah. Oh man, it's grim.
So yeah, like, so I mean, in that sense, how much does it influence behaviour? Those would be examples where it massively influences
Also in the
behaviour.
day-to-day shit, like how people respond to other people, how, you know, like
Okay, I mean, I can speak bluntly. I could speak very honestly with you here on this one, actually.
Yeah.
So we mentioned in the previous podcast that I have high functioning autism, and one of the ways that I learnt to communicate with people is through watching films and TV, and literally I would memorise lines from television shows and TV and from films, and when it felt appropriate, that would be my response to like conversations I was having.
yeah.
And like oddly, that is literally how I learnt social skills, by like learning by rote loads of dialogue and having like a Rolodex in my head of responses to different phrases. And obviously, initially, it just came off as fucking, what is this kid? What is this kid doing? Like, he's insane, right? And also...
Oh, hey man, how's it going? Say hello to my little friend!
No, literally that. It wasn't just like say hello to my little friend. It was like I would do the accent. I would behave the way he did. Like, and then over time, you know, I mixed these lines of dialogue together and eventually got to the point where I was making my own dialogue using this accumulated knowledge, like a chatbot. So, I mean, in that respect, I would argue that media, television, books, films, all those things influenced me hugely when it came to how I speak with people. And I would argue that as like a framework for me still exists.
Yeah.
It's just I have my own voice now.
I mean, like that's really interesting because that's quite an extreme example.
Yeah, that's why I
feel
thought
like that influences. Everybody has an element of that, subconsciously or otherwise.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And like it just.
Well, why do you
like,
have the accent that you do?
It's not like, well, that's because I grew up in Kent, moved to Janner Town, and then spent some time.
Exactly,
in
but like, so my
Cornwall.
point is, like, if your accent can change because of how you hear words, doesn't it follow that how you use words can change because of how people use words around you?
Yeah.
And the words that you're exposed to?
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm not saying this is like a scary thing or anything. I just
No. It's just an interesting point. And also, this isn't like the case for why violent video games cause school shootings, because fuck off with that bullshit.
And then I'm wondering if that is part, like, so do people study that in a modern setting and then take the patterns and the trends that they find from media to the way people then behave in society? Like, could you then take those patterns and apply it to medieval media and thereby gain some insight into the way people behaved socially back then?
Well, this is one of those great things in linguistics. Oh, I do actually have a little bit of knowledge I can drop on here.
Drop that knowledge bomb.
There's a thing in linguistics. It's a theory. It's currently just a kind of theory. They have the. Let me begin. There is a theory. There is a like.
Let me begin.
Two linguists.
Do you want to start again?
I'll start again. There is a thing in linguistics that was created by two linguists who, and the theory is called, no, it's a hypothesis, and It's called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Okay, look it up. It's really fucking cool.
We fucking got there.
We got there. By we, you mean me.
I felt like I was part of this.
You were definitely part of it. I think the reset was a good idea. So the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis argues that the language that you learn, so like Japanese, German, French, the way it's structured and the words that the syntax and words available to you to kind of describe like your emotions and your environment and all these things shape how you think. So a Japanese person someone who speaks let me rephrase. So someone whose first language was Japanese thinks differently to someone whose first language was, say, German or English. Now, it's just a hypothesis because it's a very difficult one to prove, because how do you show like internal thinking processes with respect to language?
Interesting, though.
Yeah, and so like, and it's related to what you're talking about here, because you're talking about like how much does media that you're consuming shape how you speak and stuff. And I would argue, like, ultimately, it absolutely has to. The question is like, what effects does it have, and what effects don't? Yeah. So like, because it would have to, because the only reason a baby learns language is because it's exposed to language. So, but yeah, I just thought the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, like really cool concept. Also, fucking baller name, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Like, I just think it's like, as names go, and I think the two linguists who came up with it were Sapir and Whorf. So there's someone out there.
So cool names.
Somewhere out there with the surname Whorf.
I feel like either of those names would be justification enough to marry into that family.
Yeah. I mean, you're a Whorf.
You're a sapphire.
Take me now. Yeah.
I want to be a sapphire. Yeah. Take me like one of your French girls.
I don't mean paint.
That is the actual quote. Yes, I did.
But I just want to be taken
manipulate
like
it
a French girl.
little bit. Yeah.
It raises a lot of questions. Like, how does this person know how you take your French girls?
No.
To know that they want.
No, I told them to take me like one of their French girls.
Oh, okay. So how do you know how they take their French girls?
Peeping Tom.
Oh.
I guess would be my answer to that.
I would say I'm shocked, but it's you. So.
I am a innocent snowflake who has never done anything untoward or sexual in his life, and you know it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Next topic.
Why isn't Unit 731 and the Nuremberg trials taught more and more in the public consciousness?
Ooh.
So to clarify here, Unit 731 was a bioweapons research facility that was built by Japan during the Second World War in China. And it is quite possibly, in the last 100 years, the most, like, the accounts of what happened there is quite possibly one of the most horrific things that I can think of
that has ever been done.
That has ever been done. I'm not being hyperbolic there. So to kind of give you an example, the Japanese field doctors would train at this facility by performing vivisections on subjects. Now, for those of you that don't know what a vivisection is, it's like an autopsy, except you're awake and you're alive. Or you're alive and you're awake. Should have said it in that order, because if you're awake, obviously you're alive.
Well, yeah.
And it's done without any anaesthetic. So there were people who were strapped to tables, having their chests split open, fully conscious, while having sections of their anatomy removed. And the reason for this, the justification for this, was because it was felt that anaesthetic potentially changed how the inside of the body would behave, and they wanted to get a realistic understanding of how the body behaved.
And also, if you're training combat medics, you might want to get them used to screaming.
Yeah, so they did stuff like doing shrapnel testing on live subjects. Again, fully conscious firearms testing. They would freeze or burn limbs and then track how gangrene spread. They would do this to pregnant women. They would do this to infants. They would do this to the elderly. They did it to prisoners of war as well. There's some accounts of American prisoners of war being used at these facilities. They did stuff like remove subjects' stomachs and attach the esophagus straight to the small intestine just to see what would happen, which you can survive, by the way. And the reason we know that is because of Unit 731, and this is why I'm curious as to why it isn't taught more. Because here's where I find it. This is the part I find most interesting. Most of the people involved in Unit 731 were acquitted at the Nuremberg trials. The reason being is that all the research that they conducted, they handed over to the Americans, and because of that, they were acquitted. It's the same as the rocket scientists who were working on like the V program, the V2 program. They all ended up working at NASA, and there was a massive internal like CIA, although they weren't CIA at the time, there was an internal like intelligence task to rewrite the history of these former Nazis who were doing rocket science, so that no one would know that they were Nazis. Like von Braun, who basically was the founder and like the father of the Apollo program, was a former Nazi rocket scientist. It's common knowledge now, but at the time that was the rewriting. But back to Unit 731, everyone involved in that. They later went on to look at things like bubonic plague and gonorrhea and how that like slowly killed the body and stuff. And they would deliberately infect people with this. There's also like accounts of researchers raping women there in order to get them pregnant, so that they could do vivisections and studies on pregnant women. Like this place, like imagine the worst horror film you can.
This got
and then multiply
quick.
It. Like but this is why I find it so extraordinary that this isn't known more and it isn't studied more. Like
because people want to forget.
Don't get me wrong, but like the Holocaust, like what the Nazis did is well understood and well known, and I remember going into horrific detail that like everything I've said here regarding Unit 731, I can remember like comparable like nightmare creating stories being told regarding
You've got
the
a good
Holocaust.
point. And it also ties quite nicely into the idea of why we talk more about the British Empire.
Yeah. The Boer War, concentration camps.
Yeah,
that came from us. Like that term comes from the British Empire.
Prison, the British slave trade.
Yeah. Well, no, the Boer War. That was the.
Was that part of it?
Well, the term
the Boer War was
the concentration camp term was coined because during the Boer War we rounded up the wives and children.
Not just Winston Churchill.
Yes.
Did it?
Yeah.
Just as a by the way, like for anyone who doesn't know,
many
Winston
people
Churchill,
feel is one of the
greatest English person ever known to man. Yeah. Like fuck off.
So, yeah, there's
so many films about Winston Churchill at the moment, and TV series that are just all about how fucking great he was.
I want to see one. I want to see one about him during the Boer War, or saying how like India, like what was it he said about India? There was some like thing he said about Indians and the.
No, it was during World War II when he let India starve.
There's also something that he said which was like really incredibly derogatory, and I don't just mean like he used the slur.
However, I'm not sure about the letting Indians starve in World War II, because I can understand that might have been a tactical decision that had to be made. Like for example, when they cracked the code, they couldn't save loads of people because they didn't want the Germans finding out that they've cracked it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and that does tend to be the justification used after the fact.
Yeah.
But
I've seen Zulu.
but the narrative is that we're the good guys.
Oh, but we were, Matt.
We were
fighting oppression.
I'm not for one. Well, no, we were
fighting against a Nazi Europe.
This is a piece of bullshit that I really wish like wasn't spun the way that it is. Don't for one second think that this war was a fucking moral war. It wasn't. It was survival.
Yeah.
That's all it was. Wasn't it? Like it had nothing to do with us thinking like. Don't get me wrong. There was a hell of a lot of propaganda out there regarding the Japs and how like they were inhuman.
Let's talk about how
and the same regarding
how
the
US demonized the Japs in order to be able to make sure that their troops would kill them, and it fucking worked.
Yeah.
Because
drop that bomb.
Okay, so like during World War One, they found out that something like 18% of people who were fired. No, where are you going?
I'm getting a bit.
Oh, okay. I just
Continue your story.
no. There'll be lots of noise, especially since you're kicking the laptop and shit. Sorry for this momentary technical interlude.
You could just keep talking.
Didn't get me a beer, did you?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so during World War One, I can't remember the exact statistics, but I think it was 18% of people who fired their weapons fired them on target. No, it wasn't even that. It was something like 18% of people fired their weapons.
Yes.
Like, most people didn't, and those who fired their weapons would deliberately miss.
Yeah, they were aiming high, yeah.
And so they tried to figure out ways of making sure that they didn't do this anymore. And one of them was to demonise the enemy so that they didn't think that they were human anymore, which is what they did to the Japanese during the war in the Pacific.
Yep.
And it worked. It straight up worked, but it also created the side effect of rampant racism within the US Army, to the point where they were just executing Japanese people left, right and centre.
Yeah, and this is another Hollywood myth that needs fucking dealing with. There is a really powerful and strong evolutionary imperative for one person not to kill another person. And I'm sick and tired of this kind of whole narrative of like, oh, well, if it was a fight to survival, I'd kill him. You wouldn't.
Well,
you'd
might,
you'd
but
freak
the
the fuck
chances
out.
are like
The
5%.
the chances are like 2%.
Really?
Like literally
Jesus.
2% of the population can do it, and of that 2%, half of them are sociopaths. The other half just don't have that mechanism, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why like PTSD exists so strongly in the army, and like a lot of the research that came out that was done in response to this. For the propaganda one was one. The other one was drill, as in drill the exercise into the soldier to the point that it becomes muscle memory.
Yeah.
So like I know in the American army,
getting them shooting at realistic targets that weren't humans, so that when they went to fire, they wouldn't think.
Also, react or die, react or die, react or die, react or die. That would be the narrative. That's the mantra that's driven into you. So as soon as you see that, as soon as you see that target, you drop to one knee, you aim down the barrel of the sight, center mass, squeeze the trigger. Every time. That's what you do. You do that to the point where as soon as you see a target, that's what you do. And this prepares a person to kill someone, but what it doesn't prepare that person... this means that a person can kill someone in reflex, but what it doesn't prepare that person to deal with is the emotional trauma of having killed someone. Which is, again, why like mental health issues are what they are.
Yeah. And
within the army.
And I don't... is there an army that deals with that? Like, is there an army that has a network set up?
Funnily enough,
no, they don't do it.
I had this conversation with you know who this is?
Okay.
Rev.
Right.
I don't want to say his name for obvious
reasons.
reasons.
Bob.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Bobs.
Yeah.
So yeah, you said this. Bob said
we
this.
had this conversation with fucking late. We were late at night, going to sleep in the tent. And we ended up talking for 3 hours. Anyway, he was talking about how like. It was different when he was in the army, and I think he was also in the Navy, or he may have just been in the Navy, I can't remember now. Point is this, he was also in the army because of where he toured. So he's been to places like Bosnia. Now, Bosnia had some pretty horrific war crimes occur there, and there's some pretty nasty shit that happened there, which I'm pretty sure he saw. He's not explicitly told me, but I suspect he saw a fair whack of stuff.
It would make sense.
Yeah. So, the question he had was, why does he not have PTSD? Because of the conversation we're having right now, I literally had with him. And I said to him, when you came back, could you, with the salary that you earned, afford a house? Yes. Could you afford to start a family? Yes. So there was a life waiting for you when you came back, right? Yes. Whereas if you look at the economic situation currently, you come back from that horrific situation to an environment where you can't thrive. That amplifies the trauma of what happened to you.
Yeah,
it's an extra stressor, and
because
that
you've got nothing else to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I've researched this in massive depth because I haven't, but my gut tells me that's why there is such a massive rise in PTSD and mental health issues in the army. Yeah,
and why is there such a rise of depression and anxiety
in everyone? Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
So here's to another 10 years of wage stagnation.
Woo! I'll drink to that. So I'm thinking we have a short one today. So I'm thinking final thoughts.
Already?
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. First of all, we didn't really kind of go into why is it not why don't we know about the British Empire and colonialism, and why don't we
shit.
know about
well, I mean, it's quite obvious because
it's propaganda.
Yeah, we want to form the narrative in the British populace to follow a certain direction that doesn't paint Britain in a bad light, which is why we avoid the British Empire, because that's all fucked up, yo. And in regards to why don't we talk about the Japanese and what was it,
Nuremberg trials and Unit 731.
Unit 731. And the Nuremberg trials were for Nazis as well as, like, that was everyone, wasn't it?
It was everyone, and it was to do with, like, war crimes committed during...
Well, I don't know why we don't talk about that, because we do talk about the Holocaust, we do talk about what happens in Germany, but maybe
the only thing I can think
the
of
narrative is they want to keep it to Germany. Like, Germany is the scapegoat. And that's what was decided consciously or
the only thing I can think of is Britain's proximity to Germany versus Japan, and also I don't know how involved Britain was.
Yeah, because I wonder what the Chinese are taught.
Yeah, and then equally, like, why is the fact that 100,000 people were wiped out in a heartbeat not a bigger focus?
Because
America
twice. Did it.
Right.
So it's okay.
Right.
And also, I think why we avoid the Nuremberg trials is possibly because of all of the people that got off and got away with horrific crimes because of what they knew. So they don't really want people learning about it and thereby questioning it or thinking about it, because then they might go, well, what the fuck?
Do you think, out of curiosity, do you think that kind of explains, like, the bipartisan nature of a lot of things today?
What do you mean?
Well, so you've got two groups of people here. You've got the people that know what happened at the Nuremberg trials, and then you've got the people who think that we're the good guys and haven't learned about Nuremberg trials, right? So that creates two different people. That's great, like, with two different kind of ways of looking at the world. One which believes for Queen and country. Like, I'm really massively generalising.
Yeah.
But my point here is, you've got one who believes that they are on the side of righteousness.
But sorry to interrupt here, but you're implying that knowledge creates your identity.
Literally what we were discussing a moment ago.
Yeah, but I would argue that, like, at a certain point, the identity is formed, and at that point the knowledge doesn't matter. For example, you can teach people about the Nuremberg trials and they'll still be like, but we were the good guys, man, because I found this paper that said... I ignored the other 100 and I found this one paper that was like, yeah, but, like, we did that and everything.
Yeah, this is like those white supremacists who say, like, it wasn't that many Jews. Yeah. It wasn't 6 million. It was like
4.8.
Yeah, it's way better. But then equally, how many was it outright? Was it 8 million? That it was like 4.5 million Jews, and then like 1.5 other groups. Like I know a lot of gypsies were killed. A lot of people with disabilities were killed. Speaking of.
Stinky.
Wow. Okay, just to put that into context, there's a video on YouTube called Meat Mysteries. Look it up.
If you want to know that reference.
Yeah. So before we get doxxed,
I ain't never getting doxxed. I'm called a dox.
I think like.
That this silence is stretching, man.
No. I like regarding, but like Stalin killed. Was it 20 million?
Probably more, and also the fact that in the British Empire, like I don't know the figures, but it's way more than both.
It's not just that. It's not just that. It's consistent in every country where it's an ethnic minority.
Yeah.
Like we went there, we really fucked them up.
Yeah.
Like any back chat, any kind of idea, any kind of perceived resistance, we'd fuck them up. And then equally, we did it to our own colonists, the Boer War. Actually, no, I don't think they were our own colonists. I think we captured that territory off another.
I thought the Boer War was all about Belgium and.
Yeah, because so it was to do with the territory. Yeah, like I forget the exact details, but to cut a long story short, the Boers they knew the land.
To cut a long story short.
The Boers,
Machine guns aren't everything.
well, yeah, the Boers knew the land and used that to their strategic advantage, and we had no answer to that. We hadn't come up against skirmishers with decent firearms before.
Well, because about that time, skirmishers were still a new thing. Like, we didn't really properly get skirmishers in our army until Napoleon.
Yeah, well, no, this is after Napoleon. Way after.
Oh, then why didn't we use our skirmishers? No, because we disbanded them all. Because, literally, okay, so this is going way off tangent here, but, in the Napoleonic Wars, as soon as the wars were done, okay, so at this time, the British Army, backtracking even further, at this time, the British Army was made up of the scum and villainy of the UK. So essentially, they went around prisons, they rounded up everybody that was shit, and they put them in the army. People would be people would be put on trial, and if they were found guilty, it was well, lose a hand or join the army, get hung or join the army, get your balls chopped off or join the army. That was your choice. So a lot of these scum and nasty people ended up in the army, and they got forged into a pretty effective fighting force. Not gonna lie, they were pretty damn good. They then fought the Napoleonic Wars. Tons of people were conscripted for it. And then when the war was over, they literally just went, well, we'll send a load of them off to colonies and stuff, and then and then everything that's left will then just disband because we don't need it anymore. We don't want to pay for it. So fuck you, Timmy. You lost both your legs, but now you're on the streets. Off you go. And so that's essentially what they did, which was funny because when Napoleon came back, all of their veterans were spread about the world, and they just couldn't get them back. So they had to conscript again, and so they had totally fresh troops. So they ended up bringing a load of old officers and old troops back in, and the way they did it was by promising them promotions way above where they were before. So they got a higher.
Shit, yeah, and that's also when they first introduced medals for non-officers.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Because up until that point, only officers could be awarded medals. It didn't matter how awesome you were. A footman, a foot soldier, just was never getting a medal.
Which sucked. But yeah. But anyway.
Sorry, the one bit of history I know.
Anyway, but they had skirmishers there, but they were only the skirmishers essentially went in front of the main line and were scattered and then retreated to the line
weren't
when the proper
skirmishers.
battles
Yeah, so they weren't skirmishers.
So that was as far as we got with
they were
skirmishers
Harriers,
there.
Yeah.
And so and I don't think any of those people were sent off to the Boer War. So
well, no, the Boers were acted like the Mongols but with rifles.
Yeah.
To kind of put it into context. So they were all mounted. They all knew the land. They all knew how to survive off the land. They didn't have to worry about logistics and supply lines. And they could do ambushes on the rear guard and fuck off into the night, and no one would be able to track them.
This was around inaccurate weapons as well.
Yeah, so. And the solution there that the British Empire came up with, we're going to build massive fences and partition off sections of land. We're going to round up the entire civilian population, which would have been their wives and children, and we're going to put them in camps. And then we're just going to wait it out, and we're going to wait until they surrender, and we'll keep parceling up this entire section, this entire country, basically.
Jesus.
And they didn't have enough food to feed everyone in the camp, and then there was a socialite or a lady of high standing went out to one of these camps, and she took a camera with her. She took photos, came back, and they were published in the newspaper. It was one of the first times this kind of thing happened. And there's a very famous photo of a really emaciated girl, close to death, who later did die, whose name I did know. It's a famous thing. There's a reason why I know it. And the British public was like, "What the fuck are we doing?" And the term concentration camp was coined.
Winston Churchill, everyone.
In that news article.
Yeah.
And that's the origin of the term concentration camp.
So I feel like final thoughts can be learn your history, yo. Don't settle for what you're taught.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm not going to say do your research because, do your research is kind of a cop out to basically just say no, I've stated my position. You go prove me wrong. Right?
Yeah.
No. If you're going to talk out your ass...
No, don't do the research, because that implies that you're researching for a specific goal. As in, I'm researching to prove this point. Don't do your research, just learn.
Yeah.
Learn about your history.
And don't read one history book and then treat it like it's gospel. Read multiple history books by different authors on the same era of history and the same subject.
Anyway, enough... virtual signalling and preaching, I feel like we can.
But it's never enough.
It's never enough. It's never enough.
Happy birthday, Mum.